Good evening. Today I will be reading another story. It is called I Did What I Had to Do, and it's written by Imminent Eclipse. It was getting dark, but I wasn't content with returning home empty handed once again. I needed something to feed my family, so I pressed on, bow and arrow in tow, to try and catch at least a rabbit if I ever get the chance. It had been 3 days since we last ate anything solid, and it was my duty as a head of the family to keep them afloat any way I could. Ever since we left the tribe, life had been so much tougher than usual, and it was culminating just then with our supplies dwindling as the relentless snow kept falling without falter. Our shelter, as inadequate as it was, wouldn't have kept us safe in the winter, didn't sub us soon. And that would have meant certain doom for our little family of three. Akak was still small, needed food to grow big and strong as I promised him he would. He looked up to me and I loved him for it. He reminded me of myself when I was his age. How my own father has always told me that he'd teach me how to hunt with bow and arrow when the time was right. Lanmana was his older sister. She had inherited the best traits of her parents and was as clever as she was beautiful. She depended on me to provide for her too, though. After all, I was a whole year older than she was. We escaped from our tribe when the ceremony had begun. It was late autumn, and we prepared accordingly. We didn't expect to be estranged out in the woods for as long as we had been, and certainly couldn't have foreseen the snow to begin falling as early as it did. We had been scrapping by ever since, too afraid to return to our real families, even there was anything to go back to. All three of us were much too young to be on our own like this, but there was no other option. The hunting bow and some arrows I stole from the village had kept us going after I learned how to hunt small game, which is why I was then trudging through ankle-deep snow, trying to find some living creature to tide us over at least for a day or two. There had been no tracks to follow, no cues to read. The woods were still as death, almost disturbing so. The great big snowflakes falling gently onto the virgin white cover that was enveloping my world back then. I waded slowly, silently, partially because I couldn't afford getting injured at the time, but also because I had no more energy to spend. I'm as good as dead unless something comes my way, I thought. And soon after my family will meet the same end as well. That's what kept me going up until that point. Walking through the trees as they blackened, ominously against the pale backdrop of every falling snow. The hides I had wrapped around my weakened body hadn't been protecting me from the elements for a while then. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. I remember it clear as a day, and I hadn't been able to move my toes beforehand already. I prayed to Manily for her attention. There was nobody to turn to anymore. As I uttered my silent prayer, the arrowhead touched the surface of the snow, and I fell to my knees. I was getting stiff, just as snake poisons would slowly begin coursing through my veins after a bite. So did the frost pierce its way into me at the moment. It was the most powerless I had ever felt. Frozen, hungry, alone, and afraid. I wondered if I should take my life then and there. But the idea of leaving Akak and Lehman alone in that horrid place snapped me out of my suicidal stupor. I took a couple of slow breaths and got back up to my feet. That's when I saw it. As I was getting up, a flicker of light amidst the trees. It was far away, barely discernible, but clearly present. It gave me hope, and I pressed on with renewed vigor. Could it be that Manly answered my prayers? I thought to myself. I was nearing the source of light mediotically, creepily. It was instinct more than anything else. The way my steps connected with the rising snow, I forgot all about how weak and hungry I was and let my reptile wings stretch wide. As I snuck towards the steadily moving light, I didn't feel any more human than a lynx would have. I was dying, animal looking for a meal. When I got close enough, I realized the source of light was a dying torch carried by an elderly, albeit large and well-armed bearded white man. He was leading a petite child through the forest as a clumsy bear would carry a fragile flower. There was a deep gash running down his back. It was fresh. I could feel the scent of iron mixing with the freshness of the night. The flesh beneath his ruptured skin was bubbling black with dark ooze dripping out of the wound every once in a while. I had seen such injuries before, and I knew what this meant. He had been cursed, perhaps even by those who survived the ceremony from our village. My heart raced. Nobody was chasing them, and the crimson dripping trail left by unlikely pair could be seen stretched deep into the dark woods, contrasting against the glistening snow. Both the man and the child were moving slowly, in complete silence, holding hands, and I followed suit. Some time would pass before the man would stumble and fall into the snow head first, not showing any signs of life. That's when I crept out into the open. As I was near what I knew was a corpse by now, I realized the child was sobbing quietly, thumping the giant to get back up. Revolting pus was boiling out of the open wound, replacing the man's red blood with sickening black goo. In a split second, I grabbed the child's hand and rushed back into the low shrubbery. I knew what was going to happen. Taken aback at first, the young boy didn't offer much resistance. We ran as far away from a cursed corpse as we could before a bone-chilling shriek pierced the soothing silence of the forest. No longer did I feel cold, sick, or hungry, just deeply afraid. There was something horribly unnerving about the screech, same as the ones we heard on the day of the ceremony, same as the ones that made us run away. I led the boy towards our camp, and we walked for a good while before I finally confronted the choice I had to make. The child was of Akek's age, but much paler and with larger, darker eyes. He must have been important to the cursed giant, but that had little to do with me or my family, I thought. So I let him walk a couple of steps in front of me. Before grabbing him from the back and slitting his throat, I whispered a heartfelt apology to his ear and shed a tear. I couldn't afford guarding one more child. I couldn't feed the ones I already had. I couldn't feed the ones I already had in my care, let alone take up one more. I looked the boy in the eye as crimson lifeblood poured out of his throat, pulsating and streaming in the night air, and held him as his soul left the body it had been trapped in. I waited until I was sure he had passed away, and then I got to work. A lemon leapt towards me when I saw I was returning with the break of dawn. As they had been worried, I perished. To celebrate, we ate meat. So what do you think they were eating? Poor little child's body. So I hope at least they feel good. Okay. Yeah, and this story is with tag name child abuse, by the way. So I should probably mention this earlier, but I think it doesn't matter right now. And I know I read it. This one was even harder than the last one. So, yeah, though so hard to read when you don't know how. Okay, for this time. Bye.